Please accept that. The topic is putting women at the center of sustainable development. My name is Elsa Marie Da Silva. I'm the founder of Red Dot Foundation and president of Red Dot Foundation Global in USA. My organization works at the intersection of gender, tech, urban planning, and community engagement. And we work to prevent violence against women and girls through a tech platform, Safe City, where we crowd map sexual violence in public and private spaces and then use that data to engage with communities and institutions for change at the hyperlocal level. So if you're interested in being a partner, do get in touch. But today, to help me unpack this really important topic of putting women at the center of sustainable development, we have Manira Alva, who's the Vice President, Political and Civic Engagement at Vital Voices Global Partnership. Pratima Manohar, founder of the Urban Vision. Maya Tamayo, co-founder and program manager at Anatbayer. Nicole Joseph Chin, founder, Miss Brafit. Katrina Hanula Bobbitt, head of policy and advocacy, Concord, Europe. And Kami Ayahosu, civil affairs officer, United Nations mission in South Sudan. So we have representation from India, Philippines, Trinidad and Tobago, Belgium, and Sudan. So welcome everyone. And we are going to dive right in. I'm going to request Camilla to put in the bios in the chat section because 15 minutes can go really quickly. So I'm going to ask Manira. So welcome, Manira. Can you share a little bit about your work at Vital Voices, where you work with 18,000 women leaders around the world? And why is it important to build the capacity of women so that we can really put them at the center of sustainable development? And as we are thinking of building better 2 years post the pandemic, why is this topic really important? Women at the center of sustainable development.
Thank you, Elsa, for this opportunity, and a privilege to be with such an esteemed kind of group of women and men to talk about this. At Vital Voices, we work with 18,000 plus women across the world who are really looking at innovative ways to take on the challenges that societies are facing us with. And the simple and most basic idea being that for development to be sustainable, it has to include, that 50%, the girls and women, and no society, no country can really make any strides at all unless this entire group is being carried along with the most marginalized sections. So at Vital Voices, we work to really, I wouldn't say that, we give women the vision, the women have the vision. But the idea is, how do we network them? How do we bring them into groups where individual voices get amplified? How do we really figure out what is that little skill upgradation they need at that point? And how do we provide that? That's really what we do. I'm not going to go into data and research. It's all on the table. I remember being at a webinar where the CEO of Sony said that right from the factory floor to the boardroom, whenever women have come in, there has been substantial change. And in the bottom lines that corporates look at, right? They're looking to see, is this economically feasible? Yes, it is. And I think that's an argument.
Sorry, Manira, can you unmute yourself, please?
My God, I was unmute.
Just this last sentence.
Ouch. This is like we're taking away our own voice, right? But to get back to it, really saying that the research and data is there, and it's really time for action. We are done with pledges and, this is the way to go. I think we're at a juncture where we believe that now is this moment. And what's so much more exciting is the leadership that we're seeing from young girls now. Literally, we're down to age groups 12 and 15 and 17 who have joined this whole movement and this whole idea of what sustainable development means. And I just want to add at Vital Voices, just last year, through the pandemic, as we started to hear and to understand what was happening around the world, we made a conscious decision to integrate the SDGs into all the work we do intentionally. So while we were working in pockets and silos, we have come to recognize that system thinking and system planning is so important. Like how Elsa said, she's working at the intersection of probably 3 or 4 or 5 SDGs, right? So really bringing that to the fore and to ensure that our women leaders realize that when you say I'm working on girls' education, you're actually working on so many more of the SDGs. So really bringing in that cohesion and that kind of connection between all the work they do. So that's it in a nutshell, and I'd love to hand over to the rest of the panel here.
Thanks, Manira, for kicking us off with that. And I just want to ask you one more question. So, when we're talking about systems change, also, I personally feel, having benefited from the programming of Vital Voices, having a space and a cohort to be vulnerable is also important. And we don't have enough of those spaces for women to come together, to discuss, to learn, to share, to explore their vulnerability, and to seek support systems. So can you share a little bit about how Vital Voices is creating that space? Because y'all are really good at it.
So we believe that leadership is a journey. It's not a destination. It's not a position. We believe the journey is long. It is fraught with obstacles. We know how much more difficult it is for a young girl or a woman or on that journey, from the pushback that comes, from the online violence, from the forces that magically come together to stop them on that journey. And we realize that along the way, women leaders need consistent support, consistent network, what we call a sisterhood, right? Audre Lorde had this beautiful term, sister outsider. The idea being that on this journey, there'll be several moments when you're an outsider in that space of power, as you go ahead with this initiative that you are so sure of, but everyone else doesn't seem to believe in. So the idea is to put you in this space with like-minded women on this same journey, where sharing your vulnerability actually becomes your strength, where you don't have to hide everything and play this game to like a chessboard. I'll take 2 steps forward, I won't show this, I'll do that. Whereas this is a place, what we call an incubator. You can come out with your most daring, bold vision. Be sure that you will be heard, not laughed at or ridiculed or patronized. And through these connections and these relationships, we have found that women really get, I wouldn't say the strength, but like the boost, like the rocket launcher gets its boost to take them ahead. And I'm not saying every idea works out, but you can be sure that it's a place where you can actually come back and discuss failure as well, and figure out what someone else in another part of the world managed to do or adapt or change or mutate. And that is really the most beautiful part of the work we do with girls and women across the world. And I have seen in cohorts, for example, where, we have had one strong voice on, say, climate justice, where someone has managed to do something in their town. For example, declare climate emergency, which people thought was impossible, and taught her cohort on how to do it. Literally with a checklist. This is what you need to look out for. These are the questions you need to ask. These are the numbers you need to look for, and guide them in that process. And then we have seen 3, 4 other cities across the world manage to declare climate emergency. This is just one example. So I believe incredible things happen when women get together, even if it's for a short amount of time, when the care work is kind of left behind, and your country and your cultural context and everything is left behind, and you just come together as women who want to see change happen.
Thank you for that, Manira. And I can attest to the fact that when women come together, you kind of support each other. And I have realized how easy it is to collaborate, because from the very first meeting, I had Safe City chapters all over the world, and we were able to expand our work. So, Yes, so that I think is really where we need to invest our money as well, in women's leadership. And these women come not only from, not only are founders of organizations, but also grassroots women who otherwise might never qualify to be leaders in the traditional sense of the word, you know. So thank you for that. Now I'd like to call upon Kasia, because you know, when we talking about sustainable development, it involves finance. So Kasia, what are the financial systems, the gaps in financial systems that you have seen? What are the new economic models that you're exploring to ensure that women are not left behind?
Thank you, Elsa. It's my pleasure to be here, and I'm happy to talk a little bit on that. And just to give a disclaimer, Elsa and I, we worked a little bit on the alternatives to the economic system and to make it more inclusive and responsive towards women needs. And I think when the systems are rigid to the certain ways of thinking, the financial system and the economic system, and women are disadvantaged because there are certain gender stereotypes, and there is general conviction that the man is the dominant power sometimes in the household that is that should take the decision. And it's really difficult to work with those societal norm to change, to make it actually that people understand that if you give women the control and benefits of the economic gains, if you allow them to have access to assets and to get an income and the power to make a decision, it's actually going to benefit not only them, but it's going to benefit their households and the whole communities that they are with. But when we're looking at what is happening right now, and I think I like what was said, what Manira said about the leadership and the women in sustainable development, the COVID really put us back, because we are living in a certain condition. And unfortunately, I am in Brussels. So I work in Brussels, I work with the EU policies, and the EU policies are very good in being designed in the gender responsive manner. So it's from the 1957, from one of the establishing treaties, there was an equality between women and men. And after that, the European Commission was putting a lot of great legislative, but then COVID comes and we see that women are going to lose in this crisis more, because they're going to lose on the demand side, because their job is not really, they usually, the women, their job is the one that is very facing towards people. So that was the cut. And then supply side is also cut because they are taking care of the children at home, right? So then we are seeing that we can put everything that is a wonderful and meaningful into policy space, but the reality sometimes is something that is not working. So I think the acts, like if we're looking at the empowerment, we have to look at the very holistic manner, and we have to look at how the economies are being really designed and what is really needed and what is really valued. Because a lot of things that women are actually delivering on, it's not being valued in the economic sense. So until we start really noticing it, that, you know, this is happening, then we really cannot fix the issue. But talking about finance, of course, we are going to this very much discussion of, can you have a bank account? Do you know how to use the bank account? How are we making the women understand what is finance? Do you understand what is securitization? And that's become a really abstract discussion, because most of the people, even if they have like benefited from really good education and knowing finance, I'm a financial lawyer, sometimes I'm feeling really lost. So for us, it's also who can be kind of like a leader and mentor to let us know, you know, what is good for us and what is not. So we can create the good, inclusive society that allows women to access the financial services, as I said, to have the access to the incomes, to control their economic gains, to make economic decisions. But there also needs to be a regulation that is protecting them if they are not being, you know, too secure and too sure about it. And also there is somebody who is going to help them when they are not sure of themselves. And Elsa and I, we worked on this program of how we can make sure that there is that migrant women who are arriving to Europe and who also are migrating inside India, they can feel like they are empowered when they take in certain decisions, because there is a lot of doubt in themselves when you're migrating to another country and you don't understand the system, when your language skills may not be at the same level. and then you're being put in the situation that you have to see how to make your life for yourself. And it's not only that you have access to the bank account, because you may not be able to leave home to actually, or you don't have a mobile phone to do that. So I think there is a lot of puzzles, like the issue of financial inclusion and the women empowerment. There's a lot of puzzles that need to work together to actually show us the full picture of what should be done. So I'm happy to be here during this panel, because I think all of us brings a piece of that puzzle to make the picture clear.
Thanks, Kasia. And we are talking about, in the project that we are working on together, we are talking about migrant women who are often highly qualified in their native countries, come to a new country and they are totally lost, and the systems work against them, cannot integrate them easily, quickly. And what we are suggesting is, can we invest in buddy systems and make that path a little smoother for them, so that the host country also can benefit, right? Do you want to share a little bit about some of those insights?
Sure, I will be very brief. If we're looking at the European context, the migration is here to stay. We have a big movements of people that are migrating from one country to another country, and they becoming the new citizens. Let's call it like this. But if you're arriving as a woman, as a migrant woman, you're facing a lot of discrimination, because you're facing discrimination because you are a woman, and you're facing discrimination because you are a migrant. So with that, even if you come with as a very skilled person from your country, in the new country, you may just be this skilled to somebody who is only good to do a certain type of work. And that also causes the feminization of certain sectors. So the women are going to work in services, they're going to take care of be in the care sector, and of course there are certain parts. So these skills are being lost. So if you are somebody who had a higher degree, and in your country, and you're coming and you have to skill yourself, it's kind of sad. And then there is not really this the sustainable development for all as we want, because you're leaving certain group behind, right? You're leaving a certain group that should not be, and it's overlooked and it's left behind, and there's no mechanism to help. So our project is aiming at addressing the thing, how we can actually look at the person who is arriving to a new country, the woman who is arriving in a country, as already very skilled and very motivated and resilient person, and how to help her elevate it, that there is really no difference from where you're coming from, and from what language are you speaking, and what clothes are you wearing, but to integrate them to the society, to make sure that there is not really the system, and break the systemic barriers. And maybe I stop here, because I'm very emotional about the project. I can talk a lot.
Thank you, Kasia, for that. And that is a great segue to our next one. Next speaker, Pratima Manohar from India. And she and I are doing a project with a small grant from Vital Voices, actually, in Udupi, which is on the western coast of India, with rural women. And we've seen during COVID-19 that the women in India are dropping out of the workforce. Pre-COVID, it was at an abysmal 26%, and now it's at 16%. And year on year, it's just dropping, and it's a puzzling situation. And what we are trying to do is bring life skills to them at their place and regenerate some of the ancient traditions. Would you like to share a little bit? And for those who are interested, next week at the Commission for the Social Development, we have a panel over there exploring this in greater detail. You're on mute, Pratima.
Thank you, Elsa. The theme, today seems to be around inclusive and sustainable recovery from COVID-19. And as Kasia just mentioned, the pandemic has really deepened pre-existing inequalities, and it's really bared the weaknesses within our social and political and economic structures. I remember the first few images that came out of India when we had that abrupt lockdown, which it seems like ages ago, but I remember so many, people who were the backbone of our urban economy being stuck on roads without shelter and food, waiting to go back to their villages because, these are migrant workers who don't really have, social security within the cities that they work in and which they're the backbone of. And as days passed, and I happened to be in the village during that time, I could see myself that the migrants would come back to the villages. You saw that women were so much more impacted by this kind of loss of work and access to day-to-day, livelihood. And I think there was a report by the United Nations Secretary General. It was a policy brief on how COVID impacted women, which outlined that women and girls were most affected by the impacts of COVID-19. And I know we've all been speaking about the Great Reset and how we need to kind of redraw the economic model and the social contract within our communities. So, so everybody kind of goes along. But I agree with all of you. And I think the recovery from this pandemic has to have gender empowerment at its heart. And the incubator, the Place Explore Lab that Elsa is mentioning, it has women at the heart of it. It's really it's a little spark of brilliance in my life in the last year or so. We've been empowering rural micro entrepreneurs, women micro entrepreneurs, by giving them very basic skills, life skills, getting them to learn how to use Zoom, for example, or how to make posters, using their authentic skills, which were not really regarded as a positive, to connect them to the tourism economy. There are lots of basket weavers and pottery makers, and we were trying to connect them to the market through the tourism economy. And a lot of these women are part of the National Rural Livelihood Mission, which is a poverty alleviation program that's implemented by our government. And they're really the weakest communities in the country. And it's so nice to see them being so excited about setting up their own businesses. And this program is ongoing right now, but the idea is to ensure that there's some kind of livelihood options for them within the rural communities that they work in. And tourism is often the bedrock of new economic activities in some of these places. So we're trying to connect them to the tourism economy. And I think we obviously need a multi-pronged approach to catalyze sustainable development. But I do think that empowering women social entrepreneurs is such an interesting and key way to ensure an inclusive economic recovery.
And Prathama, many of them are not really the entrepreneurs. They are first-time entrepreneurs, right? So how do you actually build their capacity? And what are the challenges that you're facing? And what has been the government support?
The government has been amazingly supportive. As I mentioned, a lot of the women that we've chosen have been part of a pretty strong program by the government called NRLM. I mean, having worked in the urban sector and having lived in cities most of my life, I mean, just the basics are so challenging. Language, communication, the amount of social stigma around women working. So if you have a workshop at post 4 p.m., you'd get all, their husbands and fathers and brothers calling them and asking them where they are. So, a lot of things that you and me would not even imagine. But also, you see that it's been 3 months since we've been engaging with this first cohort. And you can see the spark. They've become so much more confident. And like Manira mentioned, the kind of the network effects of meeting similar women and, sharing their challenges. And, I think just being able to make a basic living through the talents that they already have. I think I'd love to see them a year later when they can, make a living through these talents that they already have. These are amazing cooks. They are, fisher women. So, someone who can make a living by taking a tourist on a boat ride and teach them how to make a local, fish curry. And, it's a two-way, it's sustainable development, right? Like you're creating sustainable development and empowering local communities to generate their livelihood. And I mean, it's an experiment, but it's been so inspiring. Because when you see what's happening with the bigger economic system, you do need actions like this to make that change happen. So I've been excited to work on it with you.
Thank you. And you have to take development to the women, not bring them to the cities. Our cities are anyway overcrowded and, we can't sustain that. So thank you, Pratima, for sharing. And those who want to learn more, please do come to our next week's panel. I have put it in the chat section. And this leads me to our next speaker. So, when we are talking about the socio-cultural barriers that prevent women from being fully participative in society, we have other groups working to dismiss those notions. So Maya, in the Philippines, can you share a little bit of your work at Anatbayer and how addressing gender-based violence enables women to be resilient?
Yeah, thank you so much, Elsa, for giving Anatbayer this opportunity to share with our audience and hear the work that we're doing in the Philippines. And also, I'm very thrilled to be sharing the panel with incredible women doing amazing work towards gender justice and social transformation. So maybe just to give a little bit of context, the Philippines is known to have been the longest democratic governance tradition here in Asia. But still, similar to other countries in the world, we haven't reached yet the 30% number of elected women leaders, or even running for political office. Now, women candidates running for political office. So we're still very behind. Although we have so many reforms already in this country, also because of the women's movement, been pushing for reforms ever since. So in the same way, we have those barriers, the traditional leadership standards that we have, women always negotiating or calibrating the negative framing as women as weak, indecisive, emotional, etc. And then there's also lack of leadership skills training here specifically for women. So that's just giving a context why we developed the program, the Anatbayer Program. So it's actually envisioned to address all these gaps, the barriers that women, the hurdles, the barriers that women hurdles every time they enter political sphere, which is only unique to women. No, it's not a challenge which men experience. So Anatbayer was envisioned to address these gaps. But us in Anatbayer, we also know that it's not enough to just elect women leaders. So it has to be women leaders carrying women's agenda and recognizing that the problem of inequality and injustice is systemic and structural. I think Manira and Elsa earlier already discussed also why it's very important for women to participate. So we started capacitating women already in power on feminist leadership. So the fellows go through creative sessions, lectures, mentoring sessions, very also similar to the Vivi Engage, which we experienced last year. So, and then we pair them with mentors. In Anatbayer, they are required to do a passion project, which they will implement after the fellowship program. So this mentors, peer mentors, also feminist leaders and political feminist leaders, and advocate mentors who have the expertise to help them out in their passion project. They guide them, and it's amazing also how we've seen the transformation of women political leaders in their feminist leadership journey. So we can see it through the implementation and legislation of ordinances. These are the local laws at the city and municipal level. And then these women fellows, their transformation can also be seen in the programs that they implement. So there are fellows who are way advanced, but there are fellows who haven't even heard of feminist leadership at all. So you've seen how it's so inspiring to see the transformation. So, and the fellows are urged to replicate the Anatbayer program at the local level, this time with young women leaders. So these are the grassroots women, the community women also. The idea is there are two objectives for this one. The idea one is for these young women to support the fellows who are also in their leadership journey. We capacitate women on feminist leadership, but the voters will not vote for feminist leaders. So they have to organize and mobilize. And second, to develop young generation, a new generation of feminist leaders. As you see here in the Philippines and maybe in some other countries, the pathway to politics usually of women would be dynastic families. So if you're a woman coming from the political family, you usually, and you have resources, you get to win elections, or you get the seat, take the seats of your father, of your brother, or of your husband. But women coming from community or grassroots women don't have that opportunity. So we in Anatbayer thought that, we are truly successful when in 10 years' time, we have young feminist leaders aspiring to run for office, not coming from the dynastic families. So the second question, central to our Anatbayer feminist leadership and governance values and principles, would be the principles of autonomy, choice, and empowerment. So in the sessions of Anatbayer program, we see to it that we always have this in our sessions. So we believe that our agencies to exercise and enjoy this autonomy, empowerment, and choice is contingent to our recognition that inequality is systemic. So it's also a function of uneven distribution of power for us. That's why it's feminist leadership for at the core of our program is feminist leadership. So not all women leaders share these values and principles. We see women leaders, women representatives, women presidents who oppose to reproductive health rights programs, for example, in our country. So so those with less power are generally the victims of gender-based violence, violence against women, and these are usually women and girls. No, so of course, there is also the issue of identities. No, so we've seen gender-based violence and VAUC experienced by women and girls across classes, across age, across gender, ethnicity. No, so the main core, central to Anatbayer would be to empower women. We have to address this problem. So many of our programs also, we've seen the past 2 years, it was mentioned earlier that the pandemic exacerbated the problems of women. And the shadow pandemic is so huge. We have received requests seeking assistance, legal and psychosocial assistance from us, but everyone was so focused on addressing and responding to the COVID-19 pandemic. So Anatbayer gathered the fellows and facilitated the legislation of 3 local policies: the gender-based violence response mechanism and protocol during disasters, and then the teenage pregnancy prevention and the elimination of online sexual abuse and exploitation of children. This is quite unprecedented for us because it always takes a long time to do policy reform, right? So, but with the network of fellows who share the same values and principles, in less than 6 months, we were able to pass the laws at the local level in almost 10 municipalities and cities. So that's really something that we're really proud of. Second would be, Anatbayer was also instrumental in gathering feminist legal practitioners, informing feminist legal network to address the requests of assistance, so psychosocial and legal counseling, and then capacitating also frontliners and social workers in addressing gender-based violence and VAUSI. And then many of our Anatbayer Fellows passion projects would be on shelters, protection centers, psychosocial counseling. Yeah, so it's really at the heart of the Anatbayer program.
Thank you for that, Maya. And I love that pay it forward piece as well. It's central to, whatever we do at Vital Voices as a fellow too, and I see Carme in the chat section has said that there has to be this liberating urban and rural area redesign in a way, because it's urbanization should become obsolete, and we should in a way balance the development. So thank you for that. The work that you're doing is really important, and I would love to learn more from you how you managed to change the laws in such a short period of time. I know during COVID-19, access to violence resources was very limited for even women in India. So we have to learn from each other, and I'd like to take that conversation with you offline. So thank you once again.
Thank you.
And now we go to Nicole. Nicole joins us from the Caribbean. And Nicole, when we are talking about sustainable development, we can't ignore health. And that came up in Maya's talk as well. So can you share examples from your work, and why should there be more emphasis, education, and budgets needed in this area?
Thank you. And yes, health is critical to sustainable development. And I think it's overlooked sometimes, or it's actually put into that one space where it doesn't necessarily look applicable to a constituent in their particular environment. So it might actually become a cookie cutter approach to what health should be in terms of delivery. And a lot of people then fall through the cracks and are left behind. And in establishing Ms. Buffett in 2002, one of the things that had happened was I saw the isolation of women's health, and I saw the isolation of breast health inside of a bigger picture. And because of the fact that it actually infiltrates and starts to impact every single sphere of the society, I looked at what was missing, and I found so many gaps. And the gaps particularly meant that a lot of people were being left behind, and that a lot of conversations weren't being had. In terms of like simple things like breast cancer awareness, it is really about a cookie cutter approach worldwide. And it doesn't dig deeper to really look at a social need or social situation. When we look at the migrant woman and her healthcare and her needs, again, it's not addressed in a specific way. So when you look at the girl child inside of the world of health, nutrition, well-being, wellness, education, all of these things were not an inclusive conversation. And so when you look at sustainable health, it's really borderless. And I had to create some interventions. So leaving the corporate space was the only way to do that, because if I had to stay in a corporate environment where actually everything was coming to me, and I was seeing all the disconnects right inside of a professional space, I thought, there were other layers that needed to be addressed. And I could only do that coming out and starting a social enterprise and really addressing it layer by layer. And so one of the things that I've been very passionate about is creating education. some of that education is to be delivered in the grassroots space, because again, that's where a lot of people are left behind, and a lot of the cracks that people fall through. You find that there's really no way to address it, to fix it, to repair it, and then the disinformation happens, and people have stigma around women's health, and around addressing their own health needs. So you'll find that there's fear, and there's that lack of wanting to speak about things. And there's the isolation that comes with that. So for a sustainable society, we need to have that health conversation. It has to be universally addressed and adapted to suit whatever is that condition. And so over the last few years, I've been busy, in the back behind the scenes. It looks like I'm playing, but I'm really designing tools. And those tools are critical because, again, it's not a cookie cutter approach. So my breast awareness is not about a pink ribbon. My adolescent health and girls' health is not about an isolated girl in a particular part of the world. It speaks to every single social strata. It also looks at how that girl emerges into an economy and a society. It looks at how that woman, as she ages, starts to address her other aspects of her womanhood and her femininity. It looks at how the man and the male counterpart supports us in the process and is also sensitized. So a lot of it is really overlapping and the layers touch each other. And so it also applies to multiple sustainable development goals. But that's the only way we're going to get it to work. And so it also requires a lot of collaboration. And it also sometimes requires quiet, because we have to be quiet to mobilize and to start building that momentum so that the education can then be distributed appropriately. So some of those tools that we've been sitting back and creating are in collaboration with academic organizations and institutions, so that we can actually go into the space when we have completed the tool or the solution and make sure it's applicable to the actual community that we are going to address or to serve or to support. So again, in doing it, we also get to see where the gaps might still exist. And we are able to then fortify some of that delivery. So it's nonstop, it's consistent, it's constant. It requires the collaborative approach. And also it has to transcend cultures and borders, because we often think a woman's situation is going to be standard across the board. But what we have to look at is, while that health situation is standard, there are other things that also infiltrate that conversation, like socioeconomic situations, sociocultural, and of course, we have to look at how we carefully navigate those themes and make sure that inside of that inclusive conversation, we look at, is there a way to change legislation? Is there a way to also build new ways of advocating? Because we cannot advocate the way we did 5 years ago, 10 years ago for women's health. We cannot look at breast health in isolation, and that's what happens. We can't have October as the only time that we're going to talk about breast awareness. We cannot look at an isolated theme that then says, okay, this is only going to apply to some constituents and not all. So again, it's a lot of work that I do. It's a lot of hard work. I need all the support and, collaborators I can have on board. I'm getting so passionate and losing. So yeah, we have to really do it in a way that it keeps being inclusive. And Elsa, I thank you for this, because it's really where we have gone. And that's why Safe City has also found a way to be part of the conversation in Trinidad and Tobago and everywhere that you've been. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Nicole. And I love that point about being quiet and listening and mobilizing at the grassroots. So it's really important, and understanding the context in which all of these issues happen. So thanks for that. And finally, we come to education, because Nicole spoke about education, and we have Kami, who is based out of South Sudan. He's the co-founder of Girls for Tech and Innovation in Africa. I wanted to ask you, Kami, why is education critical for women and girls to participate meaningfully in the SDGs and also in peace building efforts? Please share examples from your work. You will have to switch on your video for us to pin you up.
Thank you so much. and great to be part of this conversation. And I thank my predecessors. I would like to say that education is very keen because education brings knowledge, it brings power, but also education and empower girls and women. And this has been the driving question for us. And when we co-founded for Tech Innovation Africa a year ago, we have been asking ourselves, how can we help amazing women inventors, innovators, and entrepreneurs and leaders becoming model for African young girls and other women? And also, how can we use technology to groom and empower new generation of African women and contribute meaningfully to the SDGs and the development of the continent? So informed by those questions, and also our strategy plan, we put in place various programs. The leadership program, which is currently implementing in collaboration with PP Art from Berlin to empower women through our African Women Leadership Journey. It is a digital web-based learning path that combines the positive psychology and the African cultural diversity. We also use the digital platform, especially the online, as we're doing an online meeting, to have an online monthly program where we bring together inspiring women from various backgrounds to discuss issues pertaining to them, but also to be able to challenge the status quo and brought forward recommendation for policy, but also how to support each other. We have also initiated what we call the African Women and Girl Heroine Series, which is conducted on regular basis as an interview to collect testimony of amazing women that can inspire others. We believe that they need to showcase and also to connect those who are doing, who are striving with those who are less privileged. And lastly, we have our educational, the STEM and robotic educational program, which aim at contributing to the gender equality and empowerment of African girls, and by creating enrollment for girls in the field of science, technology, which you see sometimes we have very few women. We believe that giving those opportunity to educate, it gives them chance to rise up and to provide solutions to some of the challenges and supporting the peace process within the UN Security Council Resolution 1335, which called for a meaningful engagement and participation of women in the peace process. So as a civil affairs officer in charge of the focal person for all our programmatic activities and also the monitoring of our result-based activities across the country, I have to make sure that all our proposal and our initiative have a gender component and make sure that we have the meaningful participation in women in all our initiatives. It's quite challenging because when you have to organize a program, for example, for the local chiefs, and knowing that in South Sudan, we have a country which is the community and the mindset is still male dominated, and whereby we have very few women in that position of chief, local chief. You did not to challenge our colleagues on the field office to bring on board women leaders who are not chief, but women who have been community leaders, women working in the market, or women who are working with other stakeholders to come and share their concern and to challenge the status quo. Successfully, 3 months ago, we were able to facilitate a training and capacity building for the women in one of our states. And out of that training on peace building and mediation, women resolve, not the women, the chiefs themselves, resolve to open the space within the local court for women to sit in the bench, to be able to address conflict, mitigate conflict, and also support the peace building. That was quite amazing because it came from the chief who realized that women are mothers, they are also community leaders, and they have experience, and they're the most affected by the conflict. And they understand also the dynamic of the community. So having them in the conflict resolution mechanism will bear more fruit So they advocate that women must given at least 3 seats out of 10. And currently it's been implementing. And those women who have been given that chance have been empowered and they have income. Their community also is empowered and they are more integrated. And we believe that this is the way to go. And we continue lobby the government authorities at the national and state level to ensure at least the 35 representation of women at all levels in the peace process. It's not easy, but it's a conversation and a mindset change. And that comes from all stakeholders. So this is what we've been doing. And we also have a monitoring and reporting mechanism of the Women Peace and Security Indicator. So on monthly basis, I get from my colleague from the field office what has been done in terms of activities, how many women participated, and in all the engagement, even a small meeting that they do with the local authorities and the community, we make sure that they involve women so they can give their perspective. Whenever they go, for example, for field trip or security assessment and also engage humanitarian, we make sure that the woman voice is heard and we channel their concern to other sections, we take it upon. And we also lobby other UN agencies to support them and to strengthen them. We have been working, for example, in reviewing and supporting the Women Union at the state and national level to have their association revamped and well organized, and so to come up with strategic plan, and that can be supported. So this has been a successful experience, and we believe that this is the way to go. Thank you.
Thank you, Kami. And, I really feel that it has to be driven from the top to the bottom in this term, in this quota system till we reach, a level of equilibrium, so to speak. So thank you for that. In India, we are still struggling to get 33% in our national parliament. So hopefully with the coming elections, all parties will agree to it. So we've completely run out of time, but I do want to thank all of you and end with one rapid fire question. If you had to put forward one recommendation for women at the Center of Sustainable Development to the UN Secretary General, what would it be? So Manira, you're in the hot seat.
50% representation across all political bodies. I'm done with 33%. It's 50% and maybe 51.
Thank you. Kasia?
Yes, I would say that to listen, maybe that's listen what the women have to say and not make them instrumental when it's nice to have a gender component.
Prathama?
I'd second Manira, more representation in political offices, on boards, as partners on law firms or venture capital firms, in the train stations, on the buses. We need more women represented across the society in the workforce.
Maya?
I'm glad that Manira already responded, but so I can add some more because it's only one thing. So I think mine would be probably the recognition and institutionalization of bodily autonomy and choice in the language of the UN.
Nicole?
I have one word: education.
Yeah, true. Kami?
Thank you. Education is crucial for both male and female, but for women is educating the community and the society. So education.
Thank you.
Thank
So
you.
I will end with, if you can't see her, you can't be her. So we need representation. We need to listen so as to hear her views and incorporate them in policies. We need education so at all levels so that she can make the choices, and we must allow her that choice in whatever way she wants to exercise it. So thank you, everyone. I hope this was insightful for you. And yeah, see you next week at our next panel. Thank you very much. Have a lovely
Thank you too.
day, evening,
Thank you.
afternoon, wherever. I'm going to take a picture,
you.
so just hang on. Big smiles, everyone. 1 minute, 1 minute. Okay, thank. Okay, I'm not sure because on WOVA we are supposed to end at 50 minutes, but I'm going to end the